Welcome to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Vantage Circle, the simple and AI-powered rewards and recognition platform for employee engagement.
In February, we celebrate Black History Month, which is also known as African American History Month, a time dedicated to recognizing the rich heritage, achievements, and resilience of Black Americans. Black History Month owes its beginnings to Dr. Carter G. Woodson, a scholar passionate about honoring the remarkable contributions of Black people throughout U.S. history. Hi everyone, I'm your host Shushmita, and in today's episode of the Vantage Influencers Podcast, we have the privilege of hosting Cora Black, HR business partner, City of Dallas, to explore the theme of empowering Black Americans, navigating workplace challenges, unleashing potential. Stay tuned as we dive into Cora's remarkable journey and tackle crucial discussions surrounding diversity, equity, inclusion, and so much more. Let's begin. Hi, Cora. Welcome to the Vantage Influencers Podcast. It's truly a pleasure to have you with us today.
Hello. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited to delve into the topic for today.
Yeah. So before we dive into our discussion on the topic, it would be great if you can share with our listeners a bit about your background and the experiences that have shaped your journey in the professional world.
Absolutely. So I actually joined human resources. I started in HR tech. So I started in the HRIS platform space. And that really was a moment for me to get a grasp on HR world and everything that it takes from that back end just by knowing the systems. And from there, I went on to do more HR generalist work. I also do consulting, and now I'm actually working on more of the government side with at a municipality. So it's been a wild ride for me, but now it's been 10 years with me being in the HR world, and I couldn't imagine being in another profession at this point.
Brilliant. Thank you, Cora, for sharing your journey with us. It's truly inspiring to hear how your experiences have, shaped your path in the professional world and now into the government sector. So your insights will undoubtedly provide valuable perspectives as we explore empowering Black Americans in the workplace today. So, Cora, I'm really curious to hear more about your experiences in the profession. It breaks my heart a little bit to ask this even in this 21st century, but can you tell us if you have faced any challenges as a Black professional, and most importantly, how did you keep moving forward?
Sure, absolutely. So just like everyone else in the profession of HR, we have this unique positioning in companies to know what others are paid. And that can really bring on some challenges at times, because when you have that visibility to know how much people are paid, then you're able, what your paycheck is, right? So you get to see those inequities, not just for Black professionals, but for women. So for me, the intersectionality between being Black and also being a woman, faces kind of that it from time to time, it can feel like challenges from both sides. Women are traditionally underpaid, and then being Black, you're traditionally underpaid. So then having both, sitting in both of those seats, wearing both of those hats, then, it is a very interesting situation. I also have dealt with having to navigate being sort of a token Black American, being the only Black person in an office, and having those struggles of a lack of understanding from a cultural perspective. And that definitely had its challenges, and I faced a lot of challenges, especially with everything that's gone on politically here in the US. So during 2020 when George Floyd was happening and those hot topics were, police brutality and gun violence and these sorts of things were brought to people's attention. It was an odd time to be the only Black person in a workplace or being one of very few. And that's why I made the change that I have made today. Number one, continuing to be a coach and provide my consulting, because it really is a privilege to be able to help influence other cultures and to show them some things that it might be just blind spotting, right? There might be some blind spots for companies that they're just not aware of. So that I definitely take times that I counsel and that I, have times that I'm consulting. I take it very seriously because having that influence and having someone's undivided attention on what they should be doing and what they should be looking at when it comes to the African Americans that work for them.
It's truly eye-opening to hear about the challenges, Cora, especially as a woman, the things that you have faced and the way you have navigated through them with so much resilience. Really, you deserve a lot of credit for your strength and persistence. Moving forward, Cora, now we'll be talking about the dynamics of diversity, equity, and inclusion, the call for which is louder than ever now. From your perspective, Cora, how critical it is for organizations to actively address these principles, and in your experience, what tangible impacts can fostering DEI have on unleashing the full potential of Black employees?
Absolutely. So I think one thing that it's going to sound extremely basic, so forgive me for this, but you do need to focus on your numbers first and foremost. There should never be a situation where you have a team, no matter what the department is, that does not have a good representation and reflective of the community in which we live in. And the reality is African Americans are all over the US, right? So no company in the US should have teams that don't reflect the population.
True.
So I always say, get those numbers up first and foremost. Make sure it's okay to tab and to look at how many people from diverse backgrounds do we have on each team or to represent this company as a whole, and make sure they're not the lowest paid on the team. So some companies you see, we have 30% African American population, but it's janitorial, it's, that blue collar staff level. And that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about DE&I. Also, another thing that I like to bring up on the topic of DE&I is belongingness. I love that a lot of people are starting to say DEIB, and that B standing for belongingness.
Right.
And in order to like you belong somewhere, you have to see other people that look like you.
Yeah. And do you, as someone who has undoubtedly contributed to creating inclusive environments, Cora, can you share some specific, strategies that you have found effective in fostering an environment or an atmosphere that not only embraces diversity, but also propels the professional growth of Black Americans? And how do these strategies, resonate with the broader goals of an organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some very tangible steps are things like creating pipelines from HBCUs, which is historically Black universities and colleges. So, many companies have recruiting strategies that they are sourcing employees from all over, right? So different university pipelines, maybe local universities, local colleges, even community colleges. And if you have a pipeline set with HBCUs, that's a great way to make sure you are bringing top talent and you're able to help cultivate that employee. You're able to help mold them. And that is a beautiful trade-off, because the more that you put into employees and the more that you care, the longer that they're going to stay, and the harder they're going to work, right? So it's a beautiful trade-off. And so I think having pipelines in recruiting and having intentional recruiting efforts is extremely helpful, but also having programs within the organization already set up and going. So for instance, I am a person that I take what I call months very seriously. So for example, right now is Black History Month. Hey, elevate some Black voices during Black History Month. And sooner or later, you are going to find that when you elevate these voices, even if it's during, said month, then you find, you find out something that you didn't know before. And you also find new places and spaces for those employees to inhabit and their growth potential as well. And it's just simply getting to know your employees. So I also am very adamant about, celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month,
Right.
Celebrating Pride in June, months like that, that it's a national recognition. And I say, go ahead and lean into those things. It doesn't have to be ignored. A lot of people think that that is something for your personal life, not for your work life. And I beg to differ.
Brilliant answers, Cora. So your insights are incredibly valuable and shed light on important issues we really need to address today. And if we talk about leadership representation, Cora, it has been a topic of increasing importance, and definitely for a reason. In your view, how does the representation of diverse voices in leadership impact overall dynamics in the workplace?
So what I absolutely love about companies that even think from the board all the way down, I love seeing companies that have diverse boards. And I think it is something that many people can almost get fooled by, right? By looking at the company roster, looking at the scrolling through and seeing who all is a VP or director. And
the hierarchy.
Yes. And I am now starting to look at boards. So not just looking for, and of course, I told you about this intersectionality that I'm living in as a Black woman. I look for not just Black people, not just women, but specifically Black women. And also how I think that impacts the environment altogether is when you see someone in a position, you see something that exists, then that makes it more likely for someone else to have that as their goal. So really a sort of exposure concept that when you see something, then you can do it, it's achievable, and then that becomes your goal. So in companies, and the way that you would I love to see people foster their employees and pour into them, and seeing employees grow from one level to the next, to the next, to the next, going from an individual contributor to a manager, to a VP, to a SVP, things like that. You have to see it, and that's just human nature. So what it ends up doing is creating an environment, curating an environment in which you're going to naturally be diverse. You're addressing the systemic issue instead of just looking at the numbers at that point. So that's the further down the line. That's the thing that isn't the Band-Aid. You're actually addressing the systemic issue of opportunity and people having the exposure of knowing what's possible.
But this again is itself a challenge, isn't it, Cora? Do you think corporate training programs, to be more specific, DEI training programs, can bring any change?
That's an interesting question. So I think that there are trainings that can be done, but I really believe that culture, so where you live, where your kids go to school, what you're exposing your kids to, right? Just being thinking about a complete community is going to do more for people than a training class, for instance. But I do think that there are very effective bias trainings
Hmm.
that reveal someone's biases or blind spots that they might have. And it's really about getting comfortable having those tough conversations. So many people still feel that talking about race in the workplace is awkward and uncomfortable. And oh, nobody wants to be uncomfortable, right? And it really doesn't have to be that. There's a stigma around it that is only holding everyone back, because diversity is helpful to any. I'm a huge believer that having diversity in any space makes it better, because with diversity comes diversity in thought.
Yeah, and with diversity having as a policy, DEI as a policy in the workplace, don't you think HRs can navigate discussions on the racial justice? I mean, any kind of like conversations, uh, just casual conversations, and we can see the positive outcomes maybe.
Yes, absolutely. So that's a really good example of what I mean when I say lean into the months, right? So if it's Black History Month, if it's the month of February, have some of those more racially based conversations. And
Yeah, casual but constructive dialogues maybe.
exactly. Just have those
Right.
curated spaces, those curated discussions, and make it I know the term safe space has been overused and abused, but when you do create a safe space in the sense of there's no repercussions, bring out what you're feeling, what you're thinking around a said topic. Because if you don't talk about it, if you don't bring that out, then you can't properly address it.
Yeah. So I was just going through this research paper, and I found out that in 2018, Michelle Obama, she wrote a book on called Becoming. Right, it became very
Yes.
popular, selling over 2 million copies in the U.S. and Canada within just 15 days. So it was a huge success all around the world. But even with all this success, when Michelle was talking to students in London, and they asked her about being a symbol of hope, she admitted something very surprising. She said that she still feels like she is not entirely deserving of all the attention and success. So that feeling is called imposter syndrome. And while once thought to mainly affect women, research shows that imposter syndrome can impact anyone, especially when combined with experiences of racial discrimination. So, Cora, how do you think organizations are doing when it comes to supporting employees grapple with these feelings of inadequacy and self doubt?
Sure. And that's a tough one. And that's a tough one in general. I mean, you see in some corporations that the people that have imposter syndrome shouldn't, and the ones that should don't. Right? It's a
Mm.
very interesting thing where sometimes you see those very bold personalities in high positions that feel like they're lacking in their talent, and
Mm.
they sleep like a baby every night. Then never do they question what they have and what they have and what they've earned. And I from time to time, honestly, it affects me as well in a very daily type of way, in the sense of there are times that I'm crafting an email and I say to myself, why am I apologizing? I've tried to be more mindful of not saying I'm sorry when I didn't do anything wrong, right? And that's the little ways that imposter syndrome can come out, as you're using very apologetic language and so sorry about this, let me get right on it. And really, you didn't make a mistake. So it is a thing that can really give you quite a bit of anxiety. But honestly, I think when you have an organization that is supportive of an employee's success, in the sense of saying you did a great job on this project when that project happened, and not speaking about someone in such a general way, not speaking about an employee in a general way, really helps combat that. So for instance, when I have been at companies that had very thorough and very thoughtful performance management systems in place and had those performance evaluations, the performance reviews, when my managers have really, when I felt like they cared about me the most, they spoke on specifics. It wasn't just a glossy, oh, she's doing a good job. It wasn't that. It was giving specifics. She went above and beyond on this project. She helped train her new colleagues, even though that wasn't in her job description, right? So having those specific things even tied to performance evaluations, when managers actually put the time in to give that true feedback, it honestly helps so much to not feel that imposter syndrome in the workplace.
Brilliant, Cora. Your words resonate deeply, and your experiences highlight the ongoing struggle for equality in our society and the importance of amplifying voices like yours. Cora, as we move on to conclude our discussion today, what advice do you have for Black Americans as seeking to excel in their careers? And, finally, how can organizations actively support and amplify their aspirations?
Yeah. So my main advice for any Black professional navigating their workplace is to unapologetically be yourself. Of course, be professional, but don't dim your light, because then you're often overlooked. And that can cause more frustration and more heartache and a lack of success. So I strongly suggest for all Black professionals to also lean in to not only their organization, but to seek out on their own what resources the company provides. I've seen so many times where it's a if you know type of situation. And if you don't go out there and seek what a company might provide, even when it comes to tuition reimbursement, when it comes to continuing education opportunities or stipends, actual dollars going towards getting higher certifications. That's something that a lot of companies offer, but they're not widely publicized. So if you don't ask about them, you won't know. I also strongly suggest finding someone that can be your mentor that's at least 2 levels above you.
Yeah.
And I say 2 levels above you because that's someone that has much bigger view of the map than you do.
True, very true.
And when you have a guide in a professional environment, it helps tremendously. And it can feel intimidating to go to someone and say, hey, do you mind being my mentor? But at the end of the day, it's what most success stories start with, is a strong, positive mentor. And when I have to also say, coupled with that, never ask to be someone's mentee without knowing exactly what you want out of it. So it's been a discussion even with my dad before. So my parents started a supplies and logistics company years ago, and they have been 40 years of a success story.
Wow.
And I have talked about this with my dad before, and he has specifically said, I love when someone comes to me in the organization and they say, one day I want to have this title. I want to be doing something closely to, X, Y, and Z, whether that's they want to be a director one day, or they want to even venture into possibly another career path. But when you're asking for something specific from that mentor, you're going to get so much more out of it. You don't have to have every step figured out, but definitely have some goals in mind. And those goals might change, and that's okay. That's just a part of growth.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Cora, for generously sharing your insights today. Our hope is that this conversation not only inspires, but also serves as a catalyst for meaningful changes within organizations.
Well, thank you so much. It was honestly really nice to talk about these things. And I just love that this was a topic of yours in the first place.
Yeah, I seriously look forward to you joining us next time on Vantage Influencers Podcast as we continue to explore such important HR topics, Cora. Until then, stay inspired and keep striving for positive changes.
Thank you so much. I'll keep doing the work.
Thanks for listening to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. Please do subscribe to Vantage HR Influencers Podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and our YouTube channel for new episodes.